Hi everyone. In this video we will be dealing with another set of 4 literary terms and literary concepts that were asked for June 2020 NTA NET exam. So this is the third video in this series, and in the past 2 videos we discussed about the other questions that were asked for June 2020 that comes under literary theory, and we discussed the concepts like heteroglossia, heterotopia, grand narratives, interpellations, as which were asked for one question, and then we discussed about the other topics like content and expression, metaphor and metonymy, signified and signifier, competence and performance as the next question. So in this video we will be dealing with another question that was asked for the June 2020 exam, and we will be dealing with each and every concept that were asked for this particular question. So let's go on to the question. So this was the question that was asked in June 2020, where you have to identify the terms with their respective theorist. Like you have to identify the terms and the theorist who actually coined it, or the theorist who popularized the particular term. So let's have a look on the terms. So here the terms are super reader, biopower, bricolage and chronotope. Okay, so here we have 4 different concepts. The first one is super reader, the second one is biopower, the third one is bricolage, and the fourth one is chronotope. Okay, so and here also we have 4 theorists, that is Michel Foucault, Michael Bakhtin, Michael Riffaterre and Claude Lévi-Strauss. One thing that you have to keep in your mind before learning to answer such a question is that, as I said in the previous videos, literary theory, it's a very important module because you can expect much questions. I mean, you can expect many questions from it. At the same time, most of these questions would be predictable. Okay, so because we know the importance, or we know the significance of each and every term and the chance of it to be asked for an NTA exam. So it would always be easier for you to answer the questions, you to get qualified if you give more focus to such modules like literary theory and criticism. Okay, so here one thing that you have to keep in your mind is that almost all the theorists would be really familiar with you, or it would be really familiar with any of the aspirant who are preparing for you for the NET exam, because we know about Foucault, we know about Bakhtin, we know about Lévi-Strauss, and the one theorist who might not be that familiar would be Michel Riffaterre. Okay, he is not that familiar. So along with that, if we look at the case of the terms, almost all the terms would be familiar for you: super reader, biopower, bricolage and chronotype. And again, even if you are not familiar with every terms, super reader and chronotope, both these terms might not be that familiar to everyone, but biopower and bricolage, these two are very important, and we have discussed this while we were dealing with structuralism. Okay, so now you have to identify the terms with their respective theories. So if you are learning from literary theory, if you are preparing for NTA NET exam and you are dealing with literary theory, one thing that you have to keep in your mind is that take up an author. I mean, you have to take the author, you have to take the theory and look at all the writers, all the authors, all the critics who comes under this particular literary theory. For example, if you are looking formalism, take up all the writers who comes under formalism, and then take this particular author, look at his important works, which are his important works. Then as a second part, you have to look at the important concepts coined or popularized by them. If it is coined by them, look at the work in which it is coined, or look at how the way in which he published it, etc., and then have a brief knowledge on this particular concept. Okay, so this is how you have to prepare for your NTA NET exam. So this is exclusively from a NET point of view, not from a post graduation point of view. From this exam point of view, this is how you have to deal with literary theory. So now let's look at these questions separate. So the first concept is super reader. Okay, so the super reader, it's actually a concept developed by Michel Riffaterre. Okay, so remember that super reader, it is a concept developed by Michel Riffaterre. So while we are speaking about super reader is not like an implied reader or an actual reader. So we know what an actual reader is, we know what an implied reader is. Implied reader is the reader who is supposed to be at the other end of a particular text, who would get impressed by this particular literary devices inside a text, and actual reader is the biological person who sits at the other side while reading a particular text. So a super reader, it is not this actual reader or this implied reader, but here this is actually a technique. Okay, super reader is actually a technique for spotting the segments of the text that drew most reader response. Okay, for example, you are taking a particular text, you are taking a work, and you are dealing with that particular text, where you are spotting the segments of the text that actually gains, that have a chance for gaining this reader response, that has the maximum chance of capturing the attention of a particular reader. So super reader is actually a technique for spotting such type of segments. Okay, so that is what we call as a super reader. It is not like a real reader or his substitute. It is not like a real reader or his substitute or a biological reader, but this is actually a technique for spotting the most attractive segments for a particular reader. So here, according to Michel Riffaterre, you can find that according to him, some books it actually fail, or some text it actually fails to provide such types of segments that gains the attention of a reader. Or if a reader is too much familiar with the patterns of a particular writer or a particular text, then he wouldn't be able to figure out these segments, figure out these particular areas that capture the attention of the reader. So these constraints which are imposed on the reader's possible interpretations were affecting the mimesis of the reader. So if there is no such thing called the super reader here, then there wouldn't be anything that attracts the reader. Okay, so if there is anything that attracts the reader, then he or she wouldn't be feeling anything while reading a particular text. So mimesis, we know it's actually the feel that we get while reading a particular text. So this mimesis wouldn't be there, or this mimesis would affect this mimesis is affected by this particular constraints on the imposed on the reader's possible interpretation. So it is the potential normative value of a reader response. So remember, that is what is called as a super reader. So remember, super reader, it is actually a term which was coined by, okay, so it is a term or it's a concept developed by Michel Riffaterre, which is a technique for spotting the segments of the text that drew most reader response. So let's move on to the next concept, that is biopower. Okay, so you might be familiar with biopower. Biopower is actually a term coined by the French scholar, philosopher, historian and social theorist, that is Michel Foucault. So the biopower, it is a term coined by Michel Foucault. So let's have a look on what this biopower is. A biopower is actually a much more complicated term which is implied through the technique of biopolitics. We will explain the two concepts, but in a much more simpler manner. So biopower, it is actually, or this particular word is used by Foucault in order to describe the practice of modern nation states and the regulation of their subjects through an explosion of numerous and diverse techniques for achieving the subjugations of bodies and the control of population. Okay, so this biopower is actually a technique used by these modern nations in order to get the control of the population. Okay, for example, if we take the case of India, if we use biopower, biopower is the technique used by the leaders, okay, the political leaders who control India in order to get the control of the population, in order to get the control of the people. So here the people, that is we, are treated as subjects. I am same as the person who stands near me. I am same as you. Okay, so everyone here are treated as subjects. We are not given individual characteristics. We are not given any uniqueness, but at the same time we are all equal under law. Okay, we are all equal under law, we are all equal under the government. So there we are being treated as numbers, or we are being treated as subjects. For example, we all know that at certain cases our identity is identified by this Aadhaar number. So we are treated as one among these numbers. So that is what is called as a biopower. So biopower is the practice of the modern nation states and their regulation of their subjects through numerous, and these techniques, I mean the way in which the party in power, or the way in which this nation state controls the subjects or controls its population, uses a diverse it uses a various number of techniques. So all these comes under this technique called biopower. So the term first appeared in print. So the term, it was first used by Foucault in his lecture, and later it first appeared in print in The Will to Knowledge, which was Foucault's first volume of the History of Sexuality. So here you can find that in Foucault's work, this word biopower, it is used to refer to practices of public health, regulation of heredity and the risk regulation, among many other regulatory mechanisms often linked less directly with the literal physical health. Okay, so for example, we have this insurance plan, we have all these so-called regulatory plans or the practices of public health, regulation of heredity, which are not directly linked with our physical health, but it's actually a large scheme, okay, large scheme that are associated with our health. Okay, so such types of practices are called as biopower according to Foucault. So according to him, it is a technology of power for managing humans in large groups. Okay, for example, if there is a rule like this should be given to this particular people, then you can find that these group of people, they all becomes equal under this particular law. So here basically you can find here that what happens here is that the people or the humans are managed in large groups. Okay, here we know that when we divide people into different states, we are actually not regarding the people with their identical features or with their cultures, but at the same time we are dividing them with their territories. Okay, so we are managing a large number of population, we are managing humans in large groups. And here the distinctive quality of this political technology is that it allows for the control of entire populations. Okay, so this actually is giving them the power to control the entire population. So it refers to the control of human bodies through an anatomo-politics of the human body and biopolitics of the population through societal disciplinary institutions. So we know that in our society we have got certain disciplinary institutions which is very much necessary in order to maintain this power. So we have our health plans, we have our the educational plans, etc., 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 and we know that these disciplinary institutions exert a power if we are supposed to obey them if we are living under this particular territory. So that is what is called as biopower. They are exerting their power, or they are using various techniques in order to have a control over a large population, and this is necessary in order to have a discipline, in order to have a routine, in order not to make it chaotic thing. So it is necessary, but at the same time this can also be misused. So this is something that we have to recognize, that we are used. Then according to him, modern power according to Foucault's analysis becomes encoded into social practices as well as human behavior. Okay, so here what happens according to Foucault is that this modern power, this becomes a social practice. Okay, so this modern power, it becomes a social practice, and this social practice becomes our behavior. Okay, so a modern power, it becomes a social practice because we cannot think about not following it. Okay, for example, when the COVID outbreak came, everyone asked us to wear the mask. Okay, and we naturally obeyed. So that's actually a power. Someone is asking us to do that, and we think that they have the power to do it. We obey it, and then it becomes a social practice, and finally it is becoming a human behavior. And this human subject, they gradually acquiesce to subtle regulations and expectations of the social order. Okay, so we really wanted to do that. Okay, we really wanted to do that because this would actually bring a social order. This would actually bring everything back to normal. Okay, so that is what happens in this biopower. So this modern power, it becomes encoded, it becomes encoded into social practice, which becomes a human behavior, and we naturally oblige to it because we wanted the social order. It is an integral feature and essential to the workings of and makes possible the emergence of the modern nation state, capitalism, etc. So according to Foucault, it is through this biopower, the capitalism or the modern nation state, everything works in a particular country, or everything works in a modern world. And biopower, it is literally having power over the bodies. Okay, so here you are not considered to be an individual person with his own uniqueness who prefers to do or who prefers not to do, but the thing is that biopower means someone has control over your body, about what you do, about your actions. Okay, it is an explosion of numerous and diverse techniques for achieving the subjugation of bodies and the control of population. So it is an explosion of numerous and diverse techniques, and all these techniques, they are together in order to do what? In order to subjugate the body and to have a control of the populations. Okay, for a very small example is that committing suicide is a crime under Indian legal act. Why? Because basically we can say that it's my body, I have the power to do it, but once you fail to do it, you are technically getting arrested, or there would be a case filed against you, because it's not just you, but there is also the government, or there is this modern power of the nation state that has power over your body, and he does it. You can find that it relates to the governmental concerns of fostering the life of the population. Okay, and why are they doing it? Because the government believes that they have the power to foster your life. Okay, they have the power to make your life better. In order to make your life better, they wanted a control over your life. And anatomo-politics of the human body, a global mass that is affected by overall characteristics specific to life, like birth, death, production, illness, and so on. So these are the different areas in which they exert their power, like birth, death, production, illness, etc. Because this is common to all humans. This is common to everyone who lives in a particular society. So these are the different areas in which they exert their power. And another concept that is closely associated with biopower is biopolitics. So biopolitics is the physical manifestation of biopower. So biopolitics is an intersectional field between human biology and politics. Okay, biopolitics, it is an intersectional field between human biology and politics. Because we can find that biopolitics takes the administration of life and a locality's populations as its subject. So for biopolitics, I am being made to a subject. Okay, my life is being administrated by the particular government, or by a particular any institution who is in power. So to ensure, sustain and multiply life, to put this life in order. So that is what is called as biopolitics. So biopolitics happens in order to ensure, to sustain and multiply life, because it actually, when we multiply or when we sustain life, we actually live in a population, and this population gives its control to a power. Okay, so that is what happens here. So the term biopolitics was coined by Rudolf Kellen, a political scientist who also coined the term geopolitics. So here when this comes to Foucault uses the term biopolitics in order to refer to the style of government that regulates population through biopower. Okay, so through biopower, the government actually regulates the population. So that style is called as biopolitics, the application and impact of political power on all aspects of human life. So more than a disciplinary mechanisms, you can find that Foucault's biopolitics, it acts as a control apparatus exerted over a population as a whole, as a Foucault said, a global mass. Okay, so according to Foucault, this was not just a disciplinary mechanism, but this was technically a control apparatus over a huge number of people, over a global mass. So example, the ratio of births to death, the ratio of reproduction, the fertility of a population. So these are all things that are constantly being calculated. And he contrasted this method of social control with political power in the Middle Ages. For example, if you look at the case of the Middle Ages, there the death, life, it was all considered to be the essential parts of a human life. Okay, so once you are born, you are supposed to die. So the death, then sickness, these are all considered to be unavoidable, essential things that happens in your particular life. But when it comes to modern age, people started to give attempts to extend their lives. Okay, people started to give more focus on this particular health, particular illness or particular diseases, etc., where you are given focus. That is where this insurance, etc., comes. That means even if you die, we have to support the family. So such types of concepts came during the modern age. So he contrasted the power politics, the biopolitics of the Middle Ages with the biopolitics of the modern age. So I hope that's clear. So this is the concept of biopower popularized by Michel Foucault. Then the next concept is bricolage. So bricolage was popularized by Claude Lévi-Strauss. Okay, it was used by Claude Lévi-Strauss. So here bricolage, he uses the term in order to express his structuralist point of view, where he used the word to describe the characteristic patterns of mythological thought. Okay, to describe the characteristic patterns of mythological thought. So how a myth is constructed, how can we find the structuralism of a particular myth. So that in order to explain that, he used the term bricolage. So bricolage is the skill of using whatever is at hand and recombining them to create something new. Okay, so that's the difference between a bricolage and a bricoleur who works on this bricolage and an engineer. So a bricolage is the skill of using whatever you have at your hand in order to create something new. For example, if I am decorating my room, I am not buying anything new, but at the same time I have many things I am rearranging them in order to make them look more beautiful. That is what we call as this bricolage. Okay, for example, I have an old cycle which I painted and I kept it on the wall just as a showpiece. So this is something that I have and I am creating something new with it. Okay, or I am creating something new with the paper cups that I already have. So this is what we call as a bricolage. And this bricoleur, that means the one who works on this bricolage, he is different from an engineer, because for an engineer, before beginning the work, he actually have a plan of what all the things that he need in order to make this constructed, and he buys all these things. He buys all these things in order to construct it. But at the same time, a bricoleur, he looks what he have around him and then he works on it. Okay, so that's the difference between a bricoleur and an engineer. So a bricoleur, he has a savage mind and he works with his hands in devious ways. He puts pre-existing things together in new ways and do things whatever that he has in his hands. But at the same time, an engineer is the scientific mind. Okay, bricoleur, he is the savage mind, and engineer, he is the scientific mind, and he deals with this creation entirely different. Okay, because he takes into accounts, he looks what are the available things and he thinks about creating new tools in order to make these things constructed. So according to Lévi-Strauss, mythology functions more like a bricoleur. Okay, according to Claude Lévi-Strauss, it functions more like a bricoleur, whereas modern Western science works more like the engineer. Okay, but the modern science, it works more like the engineer. So that is the difference between this modern science and the mythology. So a new myth arises from the existing myths or from the existing mythological thoughts or mythological forms, while a modern Western science, it's more like an engineer. It knows what to start and it does all the things by creating new tools. The next concept is chronotope. Okay, so the next concept is chronotope. So the term was taken up by Russian literary scholar Bakhtin, who used it as a central element in his theory of meaning in language and literature. Okay, so here, as I said earlier, chronotope might not be that familiar with everybody. So the term was taken up by the Russian literary scholar Bakhtin, who considered chronotope to be the central element in his theory of meaning in language and literature, and he developed the term in his essay Forms of Time and of the Chronotope of the Novel. So now let's look on what this concept of chronotype is. So it shows how different literary genres operated with different configurations of time and space, which gave each genre its particular narrative character. Okay, for example, each genre uses the time and space configuration differently. Okay, the time or the chronotype frame of an epic would be different from that of the chronotopic frame of an adventure comedy. Okay, so for example, if you look at the movies, the space and time configuration of the Marvel movies are extremely different from that of this another American realistic movie. Okay, for example, this Marvel, they use a Marvel cinematic universe is entirely another universe that has got its own characters, its own timelines, its own way of events. So we can say that a genre is rooted in how one perceives the flow of events and their representation of the particular ideologies. So Bakhtin's concept is a way of analyzing literary texts that reveals the forces of operating in the cultural system from which they emanate. Okay, for example, one example we can take is for example the work of Virginia Woolf. Let's take Mrs. Dalloway. So when we look at the case of Mrs. Dalloway, we know that it actually occupies a concrete space. Okay, it actually happens in a single day. It occupies a concrete space, which is actually the post-war London, a post-war London that Woolf lived in. So everything that appears in that particular text is different. Okay, for example, there are many details that are given to substantiate the space and time configuration that happens in that particular text. For example, we know the St. James Park that appears in that particular text, and the different characters who presents there, and how one character meets the other. And there is an instance where one character, when both two characters who are unknown to each other comes there in St. James Park, and nothing happens between them. So that's actually a parallel world. It actually creates another space, another time. It creates a parallel world. So this is what is called as a chronotope. So after discussing the four concepts, let's go back to the question. So this was the question where you have to identify the writer, identify the theorist with the respective terms. So we have super reader. As we said earlier, super reader can be associated with Michel Riffaterre. Okay, super reader with Michel Riffaterre. Then biopower is associated with biopower is associated with Foucault. Biopower and biopolitics, these are the concepts that are associated with Foucault in order to explain the different techniques of power. The third one is bricolage. So bricolage can be closely associated with Claude Lévi-Strauss, and chronotype with Mikhail Bakhtin. Okay, so we have the answer: super reader Riffaterre, biopower Foucault, bricolage Lévi-Strauss, and chronotope Bakhtin. So these are our options. So the answer is option 2, A3, B1, C4 and D2. Okay, so I hope this is clear. So in this video, we discussed about 4 concepts that were asked as match the following question for June 2020 exam, and this is the third video in this series. So if you haven't seen the previous videos, just go through it, so you will get an idea about 12 concepts, 12 important concepts that can be asked again for NTA NET exams, because it's a very important concepts, and some of you might not be familiar with the certain terms and concepts which are not that familiar. So just go through all the videos, so you will get an idea about how to groom yourself while you are learning, or how to prepare notes while you are dealing with literary theory for NTA NET exam. So that's all for this video. Thank you.